Okay.
Okay, so the reason why the dig was being done here was because of this intersection that was being built there. And according to Israeli regulation, the Antiquities Authority has the right to request to do what they call a salvage dig. A salvage dig means they will excavate in the area of where the road is being built because the road will by its nature, make that area inaccessible for future generations. And they want to understand what might have been there or what was there, so that if there's something of interest, something of import, something where they can learn something about the area or the history or the culture, they'll be able to do so. And not, are you moving your mouse around because it's bothering the
Sorry. Okay.
okay. And so they decided to do a dig in this spot. Okay, there had been had been a dig done in that area actually a couple of years previously when the road first started being built, and then due to some change because of a tree that they didn't want to uproot, they moved slightly the course of the road. So they came back and said, okay, we're going to dig in this particular spot where there's going to be an area that will be covered in concrete and will be inaccessible. And so that's the background of why the dig was being done there. And because, as you can see, the excavation site is relatively close. You just go back to the map for a second. The excavation site is relatively close to our kibbutz. It's about maybe a 15-minute walk, a 2-minute drive. I said, and because I'm a tour guide and in the COVID-19 era, we don't have a lot of tourists coming to Israel. I had a lot of time in my hands, so I decided that I would volunteer. Actually, Anat had tipped me off that they were restarting the dig there. I said, okay, it'll be a good opportunity to dig in this spot and get me out of the house for a week. So what I want to do is I want to show you now the experience that I had in this area. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever participated in a archaeological dig. Perhaps on a visit to Israel, you might have had a few hours in digging in a place called Dig for a Day, or perhaps even on an extended stay had some experience. But those of you who have had that experience understand that for the most part, what happens is you dig and you fill up buckets of dirt, and there's not usually much in there. Sometimes you find some pottery shards. Sometimes you can find, if you're lucky, you can find perhaps some coins, or perhaps an oil lamp or some other item. But for the most part, it's a lot of hard work and usually very little to show for it. When I came to the site on a Sunday morning at 5:30 a.m. because we start early because of it's hot here and we start early in the morning. I was working 8 hours a day from 5:30 to 1:30. So it was a full week of rather intensive work, mostly on my knees, I might add. Not particularly comfortable for, even though I'm a spring chicken, I'm really, anyone under 75 is still a spring chicken in my book. But still, spending a week on your knees filling up buckets of dirt was not particularly the most comfortable thing. But here I came to the site, and as you can see, there's no indication whatsoever of what you might find here. We had no idea. And so as I started to dig, I really had no indication of what might be. Now, I'm just going to point out to you on this slide here, on the in the center left, there are like these three rocks, yeah, in that area there, just to the right of that, beyond those three rocks, that's where the mikveh will eventually be uncovered, in the area just beyond where Anat is pointing with her with her mouse. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll show you what the week looks like. I started digging there. You can see me on my knees there, trying to fill up buckets of dirt. And the first day was really nothing special. I got acclimated to the work. There wasn't much to really talk about. When I got home that day, I was, hot, sweaty. Judy asked me, what's going on? I said, well, there's really, not a heck of a lot. We started to see maybe the beginning of a wall or something, but I have to say, even without finding anything of great importance, just the idea of seeing shards of pottery come out of the dirt that hadn't been touched for 1,400 or 1,500 years, that actually does give you a bit of a rush. On the second day, there was the beginning of a wall started to be revealed, and what you see there with the underneath the archaeologist's legs there is a wall. Where he's standing just above the first step of the mikveh. That wall there turned out to be the wall of the mikveh, and on the side of the mikveh, on the right hand side of that wall, we found some plaster, ancient plaster, I would say, ancient plaster, which could mean maybe there was a cistern, or maybe it was part of a wall or of a building that had some plaster on it. It was unclear exactly what that might be, but certainly it's a little bit more interesting than just a plain wall. Up until this point in the dig, the site had been identified in previous seasons as an agricultural farm, a farm where perhaps from the Roman period or the Byzantine period. When I say Roman period here, we refer to the 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd century perhaps, early part of the 4th century AD. The Byzantine period starts after that, the 4th, 5th, and 6th centuries. And that was the nature of the site. It was considered to be some sort of a farm, and they wanted to see what they might find. The area that we were digging in was probably in the Roman, the earlier period. And then you can see here on the picture on the far right, you can see that same wall on the left-hand side. And what started to be uncovered were some steps. At this point in the process, people started to get a little bit more excited, because steps and plaster in an area like this could mean that this was a mikveh. A mikveh, as we'll learn and we'll hear about more from Anat and then more from Rabbi Chaviva, is a ritual bath that can be used for keeping people ritually pure. And as the mikveh began to become uncovered, and as each successive step was revealed, it became more and more likely, and almost a certainty, that what we had stumbled upon here, and I say stumbled upon because it was just serendipitous that the area that we were digging in revealed this mikveh, was a mikveh, a ritual mikveh. And if you can move there you go, thank you. Here you see the mikveh itself in all of its glory. Again, on the left-hand picture, you can see the top of that original wall that was that we saw on the earlier slide, that was buried under the dirt on the first day. And by the end of the week, on Thursday, we had uncovered a full-blown mikveh tahara. Each these wide steps, the nature of the plaster, identify this particular mikveh as a mikveh that dates to the Second Temple period. For those of you who are perhaps less familiar with Israeli history, we mark periods. There's the First Temple period, which is kind of from the time of Solomon and David, Solomon until 586 BC, when Nebuchadnezzar destroys the First Temple and sends the Jews into exile into Babylon. About 70 years later, the Jews come back, and eventually the temple is rebuilt. And King Herod, in the 1st century BC, refurbishes the temple until it's destroyed eventually in 70 AD. Wendy asked, how far from the ground level was the first hint of the mikveh? We were about maybe a yard, 2 or 3 feet, when we started to see the steps. But it was really only when more of the steps became revealed did we really understand that this was clearly a mikveh. And what gave it away really at the end was the size of the bottom pool, if you will, without the water, but the size of the pool with a volume of capacity that would indicate that it was sufficient to meet the Jewish ritual requirements for the amount of water that would be needed in order to allow someone to be ritually cleansed. And so all of these factors taken together made this discovery quite interesting and changed, in fact, the entire conception of what the site was about. The previous thought that it was just a farm in the area, perhaps near a road, and there were some buildings or foundations of buildings that had been identified earlier that were perhaps protecting the road or protecting the farm itself. Now, with this mikveh, it became clear that this was a Jewish farm from the time in the Galilee prior to the destruction of the Second Temple, prior to 70 AD, something in the 1st century, which makes it very special, really, in a lot of respects, because of its proximity to the city of Nazareth, which we can see actually the outskirts of the city if you stand on the hill by this mikveh. Meant that this was around and operating even in the time of Jesus, which makes the entire site actually quite interesting here in the Galilee. The problem was that, as I mentioned at the beginning, this was in a spot that was intended to be destroyed within a few weeks. And as such, as exciting and enthralling and emotional as it was to uncover the mikveh here, with all of its with all of its implications, we were saddened and disappointed and frustrated that what could we do? This mikveh was going to be destroyed in its entirety. And so go ahead, Anat, take it from here.
So that at this point, Steve calls me and he says, "Oh my gosh, Anat, guess what? The Antiquities Authority is going to do an open house to show this mikveh to everybody. You've got to come." And I said, "Of course." And so I show up on June 17th was the open house. And I see the mikveh and I am so excited about it. And the very next morning, I get a phone call from ILTV. ILTV is an English language news channel here in Israel. And every once in a while, they have me on to talk a little bit about history and archaeology. And they call me the next morning and they say, "Hey, Anat, is there anything exciting going on in your neck of the woods?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, is there? And so what happens, they set up an interview for me, and here it is.
Now, Israel might be tiny geographically, but in almost every inch of sand, there's a story. And we see it often when building new sites in the country, because first the ground needs to be cleared, and it's often that something remarkable is uncovered in the process. Now, this story is incredible. About 2 weeks ago, workers building a new road near Kibbutz Hanaton in the Lower Galilee stumbled upon an amazing discovery from ancient times. And one of the residents from that kibbutz happens to be an Israeli tour guide and archaeology enthusiast, and Anat Harel joins us from the exact spot where the discovery was made. Anat, tell us, what did the workers find?
Hi. So what happened is that we have to build a new bridge, and they're moving the highway over. And so when they started to move the highway over, they realized that they were discovering some kind of an agricultural farm. And as they excavated only about 2 to 3 weeks ago, they came upon an amazing discovery. They found a mikveh, which is a ritual immersion pool. And as they were excavating, they discovered that the plaster in the mikveh was the same plaster that was used in Second Temple times. Second Temple times, we're talking before the destruction of the Second Temple. We are talking 2,000 years ago. And this makes this particular immersion pool amazing.
And how can you tell that it's from the Second Temple period? Show us a bit of the mikveh, because you're standing right there. Let's have a look at it.
Oops, sorry. Where is it?
Yes. So what happens is what we see here is an agricultural farm. We thought it was from Byzantine times, but as they excavated lower and lower, they realized that this was also from early Roman times. And do you see the mikveh?
I
right
can.
There?
Wow, it's incredible.
Yeah, and so what a mikveh is, it's an immersion pool, and you see the steps. There are steps going down, and apparently this was a mikveh for the farmers that worked either in the olive oil industry or the wine industry. And the reason they know it is from Second Temple times is because the plaster on the walls of the mikveh has a gray color to it, which is exactly what Second Temple time ritual baths were made of. The plaster was gray. Later on in Byzantine times, apparently the plaster improved and it was white instead of gray. And that's how the archaeologists know that it is from before the destruction of the Second Temple.
And so, Anat, I understand, of course, it's an amazing discovery, and you live in the kibbutz right near where it was found. I understand that you wanted to get a replica of the mikveh made, but you were actually surprised to get something else. What was that?
Well, okay, so I live in Kibbutz Hanaton, which is only like half a mile away. When the Antiquities Authority found this mikveh, they actually invited all the public to come. They had several tours around here. And when the archaeologist explained that this is a mikveh from Second Temple times, we got really excited because I am on the mikveh committee in my kibbutz. And we said to the archaeologist, hey, why don't we make a replica of this 2,000-year-old mikveh and put it right next to our brand new mikveh? And he said, why build a replica? Why don't we raise money and excavate this mikveh out, and we'll transplant the whole real 2,000-year-old mikveh and put it in your kibbutz.
That is incredible. And very briefly, before we have to let you go, I understand this has become quite the cross-cultural production. Tell us a little bit about that.
So what's another thing that's amazing is that in the Antiquities Authority, many of the archaeologists are Israeli Arabs. The archaeologist who found this Jewish mikveh is an Israeli Arab archaeologist, and the archaeologist that told me let's transplant it is also an Israeli Arab archaeologist trying to save a Jewish mikveh. That's the kind of coexistence we have in the Galilee. That's why I love living here.
That is beautiful, and I share in your enthusiasm, Anat. Thank you so much for taking us right to the site that it was found just 2 weeks ago. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Now, Israel might be tiny.
So this is a video. I'm going to skip over it. Let me tell you why mikvahs are so fascinating in archaeology and history, and what the connection is to our people. Today, in the reform and in the conservative movements, mikvahs are not such a very profound part of Jewish tradition. However, they used to be really, really important. And one of two things that if you find in archaeology, there are two finds that if you find them, you are absolutely 100% sure that your finds are Jewish. One is a menorah and the other one is a mikveh. If you find a mikveh, it is the most Jewish thing, one of the most Jewish things you can find in archaeology. Now, what happens in the first temple times? The first temple is built in 950 BCE. And you know what? The books of the Tanakh were not even written yet. Okay, so the temple is built, the belief in one God is formulating, it's solidifying, it's unifying some people, and then it goes on and on and on for about 400 years. At this time, the biblical texts are composed in the 8th century BCE, in the 7th and the 6th century. The books of our Tanakh, the books of the Hebrew Bible, start to get composed at this time. In the texts, it talks about living waters. Now, what is living waters? Mayim Chaim. These Mayim Chaim are supposed to purify the unclean. The idea that you are unclean and need to be immersed in living waters in order to do certain things, certain ritual things, starts to be compiled at this time. The waters that we're talking about are natural waters, the sea, the rivers, the springs, all kinds of waters that are around the kingdom. And the Babylonians arrive in the year 586, and they destroy this first temple. Until the destruction of the first temple, there is only talk. The writing of the sacred text, the Hebrew Bible speaks of water as a purifying agent. There's no archaeological evidence of any human-made mikvahs. All of the immersion and the purification was done with natural waters. When the Persians conquer the Babylonians, just a few years after the destruction and the exile of the Judeans from Judea, all right, Persian Cyrus the Great conquers them, and he allows the Judeans to return back to Zion. Zion is another name for Jerusalem. And so the Judeans are allowed to return to Jerusalem. And one of the things that they do, it takes them time, but one of the things that they do is they rebuild the destroyed temple. And so now it's called the Second Temple. During the Second Temple times, this takes about 70 or 80 years for the temple to be rebuilt. They rebuild it, and now it's called the Yehud province. The Yehud, this is where we get the word Yehudim. The temple is very small and quite unimpressive, even smaller than what it used to be when it was the first temple. Okay? Alexander the Great is the next conqueror that comes into the land, and he brings the Greek Empire around the year 330 BCE. He conquers the land at that time. Eventually, the Seleucid Empire, one of his generals was a man named Seleucus, and the Seleucid Empire, those are the ones that we know as the Greek Syrians. They bring some oppression to the Judeans. And then we have the story of a family called the Hasmonean family, Hashmonaim. And right now we've got a lot of Greek oppression. The Judeans are suffering under the yoke of the oppressor. And this Hasmonean family, which is a priestly family, they rise up, and Mattathias says, "Those who are with God, come with me." And they throw away the Greeks and they rededicate the Second Temple, and that's why we celebrate Hanukkah. Now, what happens is that the Jewish rituals and the Jewish traditions become more and more strict and more extreme. The Jewish people went through trauma, a lot of trauma with the Greeks, and the rededication of the temple brings them to become much more observant in all of these rituals that are really, really solidifying by this time. However, there are still no archaeological evidence of human-made mikvahs. Now, the Hasmonean kingdom begins in the year 167 BCE. If you look at the map, okay, you will see that here, I'm going to point to, do you see this area here? This is the very first part of the Hasmonean Empire. Every time there was a new Hasmonean king, they expanded and expanded and expanded, and eventually, after about 100 years, the Hasmonean Empire becomes that big. It extends all the way into Lebanon, down past Beersheba, down past Gaza, Ashkelon, and all the way to today's border with the Sinai. The empire really grows very quickly. It expands and expands. Why is that important? Because for the very first time, the Judeans, who are taking with them more and more strict rituals and traditions, are now expanding. The Hasmoneans have to send soldiers to conquer all of the lands, and so you've got Judeans living further and further away from Jerusalem. Live further and further away. They settle down and they take with them the rituals and the strict observance that had grown during the early Hasmonean kingdom. Not only that, 3 times a year during the 3 Chagim, which are Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, everybody comes back to Jerusalem in order to bring God the sacrifices into the temple. And so it takes you 2 or 3 weeks to walk back to Jerusalem, but your life is far away. And when you come into Jerusalem, you don't actually live there. And so what happens during the festivals 3 times a year, tens of thousands of pilgrims start to arrive into Little Jerusalem 3 times a year. And one of the rituals that they have to do, because they all are going to go up to the temple, is before you go up to the temple, you must what? You must immerse in water in order to purify yourself. And so by now, it is impossible just to rely on the natural springs around Jerusalem. For example, the Gihon. The Gihon was fine when just a few thousand people came. But by now, 100 years into the Hasmonean Empire, we've got tens of thousands of pilgrims coming. And this is the first time that human carved mikvahs start to appear in the archaeological finds, okay? Different groups in the Jewish kingdom, different groups in the Hasmonean kingdom start practicing their rituals differently. Each one wants to be more strict than the other, and they all use water as a very important part. Some of them daily immersions. If you're going to do daily immersions, you have to create an ability for you to do this. And the first human-made rock-hewn mikvahs appear in the archaeological record. This is where the first time we see mikvahs carved into the rock in people's homes as well, okay? Later on, when the Romans arrive in the year 63, we call this the late Second Temple period. And by now, ladies and gentlemen, 3 times a year, we've got not tens of thousands of Jewish pilgrims coming to Jerusalem, but hundreds of thousands of Jews arrive to the Temple Mount 3 times a year. And now we need not tens, not dozens, but we need hundreds of human-made mikvahs all over Jerusalem, not only around the Temple Mount, but around the old, what we have the old city and the city of David, and in the outskirts as well. Many Jewish groups use this for daily purity rituals. For example, the Essenes who live over in Qumran by the Dead Sea, they immerse twice a day. We have groups that are following very, very strict rules, and mikveh ritual becomes a very important part of Jewish life. Okay? Now, Jews start to be spread all around the Roman Empire, okay? And with the hundreds of thousands of pilgrims coming each year, this is the very first time we see mikvahs not only around Jerusalem, but also way out in the Galilee. And the mikveh that we found just a few minutes walk from our kibbutz is one of those mikveh that is needed for purity immersion in agriculture. Okay, the farmhouse that we found was either dealt with vineyards to make wine or olive trees to make olive oil, or even both. And by this time in the Second Temple period, in the late Second Temple period, in order to make the most important and pure wine, you had to immerse before you do that. And even today you have to, by the way, immerse if you're going to make a very, very kosher wine. And also olive oil. You had to immerse before dealing with olive oil. And this is where the mikveh that we're talking about is made. This here is one of the hundreds of mikvahs found around the Temple Mount area. This is in the Ophel, the ascent to the Temple Mount. Okay, this is in one of the outskirts of Jerusalem in Ein Kerem. Also, we have mikvahs all around Judea, all around Jerusalem. Now, we keep calling it Second Temple Mikveh. The problem is, and this is something we did not realize until some very big research was done on mikvahs, is that when the Great Revolt happened in the year 70 and the Romans came in and destroyed the Temple Mount, destroyed the temple, and exiled all of the Judeans from Jerusalem, it did not mean that the mikvahs outside of Jerusalem were destroyed. As a matter of fact, most of the mikvahs that were there kept working. They kept serving the Jewish community all the way up to the Bar Kokhba revolt. Okay? There were no temple pilgrimages anymore. And so we're not talking about Jerusalem. We're talking outside of Jerusalem. The Great Revolt was an economic rebellion, okay, which caused the destruction of the temple, but did not cause the destruction of the Jewish people on the outskirts and away from Jerusalem. Mikvahs were still in daily use because, you guys, the expectation was that any day a Messiah will come and we will be redeemed. The expectation of redemption was very strong. Only 70 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, another rebellion happens, and it's called the Bar Kokhba rebellion. Mr. Bar Kokhba, Shimon Bar Kokhba, Simon Bar Kokhba, becomes the leader of a very, very extremist group of Jews who are looking for redemption. They are supported by rabbis like Rabbi Akiva, who believe this is the Messiah and we are going to be redeemed. And so up until now, the belief is that there will be redemption. In this particular rebellion, 500,000 Jews are killed. Okay, we're talking about 500,000 Jews, and hundreds of villages are destroyed, not so much around Jerusalem anymore, but in the Galilee and in the south and all over. The Jewish people are hit very, very, very hard. And the trauma and desperation caused by this particular rebellion causes a decline in faith and a decline in traditional practice and a decline in purity observance. People are very traumatized and they decide, God is not with us anymore or whatever, and the whole ritual practice really starts to decline as a central part of daily life. And this is where mikveh use starts to go down. Until now, men needed to immerse themselves in mikveh. Most of the people immersing in mikveh were men at the time, okay? But because there's no temple anymore, the regulations and the laws connected with the temple observance were canceled because we don't have a temple anymore. okay? And because we don't have a temple anymore, men's use of mikveh goes down. It is now, okay, it is now that the hope for redemption really, really wanes. And the mikvahs in the Galilee, okay, this is a mikveh right next to the Sea of Galilee, by the way, and in Sipori, which is the city very close to us, that is another mikveh. As you can see, they all look very much alike. And this particular mikveh, this is our mikveh, it was found in next to the Yiftachel stream, the junction, in the Tzipori agricultural fields, and we live in the Lower Galilee. This particular mikveh continued to serve as a mikveh in the 1st century and in the 2nd century. And this particular mikveh, the one we are so desperately trying to save, this particular one was destroyed in the year 363, on May 19th of the year 363, in a huge earthquake that happened in Israel and destroyed many, many cities. And it was after this earthquake that the mikveh was filled in, covered up, and the later farmhouse was built on this particular mikveh. So as you can see the ancient mikveh is sitting right there, and you see the columns, the huge column. The reason this is going to be destroyed in a few weeks is because there's going to be a support concrete poured here, and so all of the mikveh and the 24 feet around it are going to be destroyed. And this is the reason that Steve and I and Chaviva decided that we've got to do something in order to save it. This is a bird's eye view from a drone into the mikveh. Look how beautiful it is. Just gorgeous mikveh. This is in danger of being destroyed one more time, and hopefully it will be excavated out and transported and placed in our kibbutz. And what I'm trying, so Chaviva is going to take it from here, and her name is Rabbi Chaviva Ner David, and she is one of the experts in mikvahs, right, Chaviva?
Yeah, from the spiritual point of view.
Okay. Take it away.
Okay. So what I just found so synchronistic about this whole story is that Hanaton holds the only mikveh in Israel that is open to anyone who wants to come to immerse. And we're not run by the Orthodox rabbinate in Israel, where we run the mikveh, and so they can tell us what to do and who can use it and who can't use it. So it was very exciting to me when I heard that they found this mikveh right next to our kibbutz, because we run this very special mikveh, which is part of a larger movement in the world of what I call reclaiming and reframing mikveh. And so this really fits in with what Anat was speaking about, because what happened was after the temple was destroyed, so as Anat explained, the second temple, so mikveh and purity practices fell out of use. But that doesn't mean that people stopped going to mikveh. It means that men continued to go to mikveh for what I would call spiritual reasons. I mean, that word probably didn't exist back then, but to go not because they had to go, not because they were obligated to go, because without a temple, there was no reason for men to need to become ritually pure. The word in Hebrew is tahor. So actually, Anat, when on your slide, and so I'd say even for next time, it's not unclean, really. It's what I would say ritually impure is the term that I would use more, not that they needed to physically clean themselves. It was more to transition to a state of ritual purity out of ritual impurity. So men didn't need to do that anymore because they weren't worshiping the temple, but they still might have wanted to have this feeling of purity, whatever that means. And hopefully I'll have time to talk a little bit about that. And women continued to go to mikveh, to immerse in mikveh for purity reasons, because menstrual purity, or when bleeding from the uterus, is the only kind of ritual impurity in the Bible that has another ramification, which is that sexual relations were forbidden if after a woman bleeds from her uterus. So many of you might have heard of mikveh as being connected to that ritual of immersing in the mikveh after bleeding from the uterus. And it really became, in many people's minds, that that's what mikveh is about. So it became for women something that was about an obligation, that they needed to go to mikveh to become ritually pure in order to have sexual relations with their partner. And for men, it remained this thing of men can go when they want to go, to feel pure, for spiritual purposes, as I would say. And that's the split that happened. And not when you said that mikveh is not so central in Reform and conservative movement. So I would say that that was true for a time. And even conversion, which in the rabbinic period, the rabbis in the Talmud adopted mikveh as the ritual for conversion. So there was even a period in the Reform and conservative movements, mostly Reform were not using mikveh even for conversion for years, and now they do. And also the conservative movement, and they certainly do now. And there's been a resurgence of mikveh in general, and this is our mikveh at Hanaton is part of this movement that I'm calling the reclaiming and reframing movement, which is that the idea is to reclaim mikveh as this powerful ritual that it is, and to take away some of the shame and this idea of that it's about women being dirty and this unclean idea, and to really look at mikveh again as a positive, powerful transition and transformation ritual. Now, I would say that this actually is what it was originally, and if you look at the sources, so in the Bible, the first, right when you open up in Genesis, in the creation story, the word mikveh appears. And I'd say that's the first mikveh that ever existed, is the ocean. So if you know that those verses, it says that everything was water, and there was darkness, and the divine spirit was hovering over the waters. And then it says that God started to separate. So God separated the upper waters from the lower waters, and then God says to the lower waters, collect yourselves into pools. And that's the word mikveh. The word mikveh means a gathering of water, mikveh mayim, a gathering of water. And so then it says, God says to the waters, collect yourselves into pools, and in Hebrew it's yikavu hamayim lemakom echad, the water should all come to one place, should gather to one place. And then it says that God called that mikveh mayim, that mikveh, the yamim, the seas. And so that's right there, right at the beginning of the Torah, of the Bible. And actually there's a rabbinic opinion that when you build a Jewish community, you're actually, the first thing you're supposed to do is build a mikveh, which is really mirrored in the creation story. So the first thing you're supposed to do is build a mikveh. And the deeper spiritual meaning behind that story, in my mind, is that when in the creation stories, when God created the world and created a world of separation, and you say it started from wholeness, let's say, and from the divine womb, even you can look at, and then this birth of the world into a world of separation, that God left us the mikveh to experience for a few moments that feeling of going back into the womb, or of wholeness that existed before creation. And so it's really a ritual about feeling that feeling of wholeness and of unity and of kind of going back into yourself. If you think about the fact that your body is made up mostly of water, so it's really also about going kind of back to your essence, back to your untouched, pure state. And that's why I think that that mikveh was used for purity purposes, because it's this ritual of really touching this part of yourself that is the most pure, that is like your deepest essence and your wholeness, this feeling of being whole and pure. And so you can keep coming back to that each time you go in the mikveh. You touch that part of yourself, and you can look at it as a rebirth, a renewal, a transformation. It's all of these different things. And so our mikveh, what's really special about it, I'll tell you a little bit about it, is that first of all, we're open to anyone who wants to immerse, as I said. So the rabbinate, the mikvahs of the Orthodox rabbinate in Israel, they only allow certain people to come use the mikveh, and women can only use the mikveh if they're married, and only in the evening. Our mikveh is open 24 hours a day for anyone who wants to come. And women, you call, you make an appointment, and it's really, the ritual is really in the hands of the person who comes to immerse. We ask them what they would like, and if they would like somebody to be with them, if they wouldn't like somebody to be with them, if they'd like to create a ceremony. It's all really just about serving the person who comes, just like the ocean. Nobody makes rules about who can immerse in the ocean. And we have groups who come to learn about mikveh from all around the world, and we do workshops. We have people coming to do all kinds of life transition and transformation, healing, and it's really a very, very special place. Lots of conversions, reform and conservative conversions in Israel take place at our mikveh, because they will not allow them to take place at the regular rabbinate Orthodox mikvehs, except for a couple that there was a Supreme Court lawsuit that they were told that they have to open, but they only open once a month. And so our mikvehs, the purpose of our mikveh, I guess that's the main difference, is that our mikveh's mission is to just be open for anyone who wants to come to immerse, no questions asked, and we just provide that service and help them have the most spiritual and unintrusive experience that they can have. So look at the time. Okay. Anything else to add? Well, maybe you have some questions, but I have a quote here from a woman who came to use our mikveh after she had experienced sexual abuse as a child and worked many years to heal from this. And she came to the mikveh to do a ceremony, and this is what she sent me an email afterward. When I immersed in the mikveh, I was filled with complete amazement and joy to see that my soul had survived untouched and could not be touched after all I had been through. I'd been given an incredible gift to discover that my glowing soul will always be available to me. The mikveh works on such a deep, unconscious level. You enter with trust in the immersion experience and another realm of existence, beneath normal consciousness. I had no idea it would feel so profound. So I want to close by saying that the fact that this mikveh was found so close to our mikveh, and if you see the similarity in the way it looks as well, which is exciting, that our idea is to move that mikveh next to this mikveh, and so that when people who are already coming to have this experience which they've been doing for years, they can actually come and see this mikveh, this ancient mikveh that existed 2,000 years ago in the same spot, more or less, and really feel that experience of continuity, that they are performing a ritual that 2,000 years ago people also performed right here. And perhaps we can even get that mikveh back to be a working mikveh, and people could choose if they'd rather immerse in a heated, clean where the water is cleaned and heated over here on the right, or if they want to go to the more, maybe whatever you want to call authentic, cold water, rainwater experience over here. And rustic, okay, that's what I'm looking for. Rustic. And so to be able to give people that choice would just, it's pretty much like a dream. And the fact that, that we can make this happen, and that the word synchronistic keeps coming up for me with this, the fact that it was found right here, right next to this mikveh, the fact that it came, this, as well, everybody's story, Steve, that's exactly the spot where they decided to dig, and Anat with her, the next day the woman calls and says, is anything, there were so many things in this story that just happened at exactly the right time, and we just have to believe that this was meant to be, and I believe that it was. So
thank you, Haviva. And I just want you to look at these two photographs. I mean, look at this. It is amazing. They are so similar. The mikveh from today and the mikveh from 2,000 years ago. It is mind-blowing. And our dream, as soon as the archaeologist said, why don't you just transplant it? Our dream was to move the ancient mikveh out, save it, and move it and place it right next to the new mikveh. So here we are standing on a hill in Hanaton. You can see that on the left-hand side. That is the intended placement of the ancient mikveh, and it sits about, I don't know, we're planning on putting it maybe about 30 feet away, 30 feet, 40 feet away from the modern kibbutz mikveh. Down on the bottom right, you're looking from the bottom of the hill, but that hill is undeveloped, and our dream is to have this mikveh anchor an archaeology park that we are planning on putting together with the full support and enthusiasm of the Antiquities Authority, who is very excited about this and wants to help us by donating or giving us all kinds of different archaeological finds that we can put in this archaeology park. Okay, so and so what we started to do was we started a crazy fundraising campaign. We hired, we haven't hired yet because we haven't raised all the money, but we went to a conservator, construction engineer who specializes in ancient archaeological technology, who does this kind of thing, and he gave us a quote. He says, yeah, I can do this, no problem, I can do this. And so he gave us a quote, and we've been crazy trying to raise money. And Steve, why don't you take it from here?
So, when we finished digging about a month and a half ago, and I was done with that week, I said, okay, my job, my work is done here. I'm done here. Little did I know that it was just beginning. Because as soon as Haviva and Anat said, hey, let's move the mikveh from its place to the kibbutz, this idea of moving a hole in the ground, if you'll permit me to refer to it that way, from one place to another is kind of crazy. But I got swept up in the concept, and the three of us have been working tirelessly to try and make this happen, which meant meetings with the regional council and meetings with the company that's doing the road building to have them delay construction, and then meetings with the Antiquities Authority and the people who are involved in museums and presentations, and actually with help of some people here on the kibbutz and Anat's persistence and a lot of good luck, we actually got to the head of the Antiquities Authority, who is pressing on the Prime Minister's office and who to give us some funding and some support. So all these things are coming together. We are still really in a race against time to make sure that we can get the adequate funds and the support of all the people involved to make sure, number one, the mikveh doesn't get destroyed, and number two, that we're able to move it to a site that, as Anat explained, and Chaviva's dream close to the mikveh here, the Shmaya mikveh. What I've done, and although this is not a fundraising event, it's more an idea to give you a sense of what mikveh is. I put on the chat, I put in a link to the Juicer fundraising account. If anyone wants to go onto that and click on that, they're more than welcome to help us make sure that we have the funds not only to get the mikveh here, but once it's here to kind of develop that site so that it can be hopefully used or have the opportunity to be used by people who come to see the mikveh or to use the mikveh at Shmaya, which is, as Chaviva said, is really a unique place here in the landscape, in the spiritual landscape of Israel. We've been really, I'd say, impressed and gladdened by the support that we've seen from people all over the United States and here in Israel, who have kind of been energized by the idea that this dream might actually come to pass. So that's what we're trying to do. It's been very exciting. It's been very intense this last a month. And as I mentioned to someone before, although I had never really considered immersing in a mikveh, I've been immersed in the mikveh for the last month up to my earlobes almost every day. And actually I look forward to the point where if the mikveh gets here and becomes usable, whether in the ancient mikveh or in the new one, that I will use the opportunity to take my first physical immersion in the mikveh, which will be a great new experience for me.
So I have to say that maybe I just want to make sure you did not miss what Chaviva said about that the Yeshu Dre, who is the engineer that told us, yeah, I can do this. He not only said he can excavate, he has to saw it out of the limestone rock and transplant it, but he said, you know what? I not only can move it, but I can refurbish it so it works again as a mikveh. And we almost fainted. What? So as tour guides, Steve and I are like so tantalized by the idea of bringing groups here and saying, okay, which mikveh would you like to go into? The 2,000-year-old one or the new one, or just to have, and this would be the only mikveh in all of Israel that is 2,000 years old and usable as a mikveh. This has not happened before, and wow, so we're very excited about that. Chaviva, you want to say one last 2-3 sentences, and then we'll take questions?
I am interested in the water. How do you get the water there? Sorry.
Hold on just a minute. Chaviva?
Yeah, I think the only thing I maybe didn't emphasize is that our mikveh is part of this larger movement in the world. And so there are mikvehs like this around the world. In America, there are a lot in the United States of these mikvehs that are community mikvehs that are open for anyone. And it's really part of a revolution. And you can all, I think you live in the same area maybe, so I can tell you which ones are in your area if you're interested in having this kind of experience. They might be closed now because of the pandemic, but some are opening up again. So if this, yeah.
So as a matter of fact, I want to add to that, my youngest daughter, joined the Israel Defense Forces 3 days ago. And the day before she joined the army, she said, Ima, I want to go to the mikveh. Because here in Hanaton, a lot of us go to the mikveh at different kinds of life cycles. Bat mitzvah, turning 50, empty nesters. So I'm going to go to the mikveh. Hope maybe tomorrow I'll go because I just became an empty nester. And she wanted to go because she said, I'm starting something new in my life. I want to go to the mikveh, which is it's a very it's a very cool thing, I think. Anyways, are there any questions, you guys?
I was interested in the water. How do you get the water in it?
In which one?
I would like to know in each one of them. The new one and the old one.
Okay. Haviva, can you tell us about the water?
Yeah. So we have a place that the water is the rainwater is caught on the roof of the mikveh, and there's a cistern, a big cistern going down the side of the wall of the building too. It's filled with rainwater, and the way it works in a human-built mikveh is that there is a cistern of rainwater that's always filled with rainwater, and that water kisses the water of the immersion pool, which we can clean and keep up to the standards of the health codes, and we can even heat. And so the immersion pool has a connector to the cistern, to the rainwater cistern. And so they're always touching each other, and the waters are touching each other and can kind of go back and forth. But you actually don't immerse in the rainwater cistern. So that's the way a modern mikveh works, as opposed to this mikveh that if we would fill it, I mean, it would be a different system. It would, yeah. Anata, do you want to say something about that? Do you know?
What difference?
So I just want to say that in the sacred texts, in the Tanakh, in the Torah actually, it explains exactly. No, actually, that was more Mishnah and Talmud, right? The exact proportions.
Yeah. So there's 40 se'ah is the size that it has to be. Right. It has to be big enough that a person can immerse in it. Yeah. And the question is, whether this mikveh would be filled with actually completely with the rainwater, and then you go in and you immerse, and you would probably have to clean it out. I mean, those are all the kind of questions that we have to find out.
We'll figure it out. But in our sacred text, there is an exact proportion. You have to have 40 of this and this and this, and they have to be. I mean, there are a lot of rules and regulations about making a mikveh kosher. But yeah, it's all written. It was all written in the Mishnah Talmud times.
And how much of it has to be rainwater as opposed to
like natural water and not that kind of.
They even talk about whether you can put wine in the mikveh.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. If there was no water, can you immerse in wine? That was one of the questions, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
So Sarah asked, how close are you to your goal? That's a good question. And what is the Prime Minister's involvement? So the easiest question is, are there any other Masorti and progressive shuls in Israel involved in this project? No. That's the easy answer.
Well, let me say this. That's true now, although we, as we're getting closer, there are some thinking that we may want to reach out to some of to our sister congregations. There are congregants in other shuls that have contributed. So there are people in Jerusalem, there are people in Ra'anana, there are people around the country from Masorti shuls. The shuls themselves as an entity are not diverting funds from their own operations to
but individuals from
individuals for sure are involved. Okay. In terms of the Prime Minister's office, at the moment the Israel Antiquities Authority is negotiating with the Prime Minister's office as to the amount of assistance that's going to be given, and since we're not sure exactly how much, we are still very much anxious to raise. We need a number of thousands of dollars actually to make sure that we have enough funds so that even when it gets here, that we can develop it and to make it into the kind of place that's going to be welcoming to the public. Because even if there is help or more help from the Prime Minister, from the Prime Minister's office, they have an office for Moreshet, which is kind of cultural heritage. it may not cover all of the costs that after it gets to the kibbutz. So we're still, numbers of thousands of dollars are still needed to be raised.
Yeah. So what happened was, as soon as we started to, raise money, we knew the quote. The quote that that Yeshu Dre gave us was $75,000. He said it's going to be 286,000 shekels. And then we actually forgot that he's going to add VAT to that, so we underestimated, right? But doesn't matter. So we set our crowdfunding at 75,000. And then the regional district came in and said, oh, this is a really nice project. We'd like to help. Because they want their name on it, because it's a really nice project. So they said, we'll give a little bit. And then we managed to get the construction company, knowing that this is a really nice find. And if they don't do their best to get it out of there, it's going to take a long time. It's going to stick them. They're going to get stuck not being able to build. So the construction company said, oh, you know what, we'll help. We can't give any money, but you can use all of our equipment if you want. And so the price went down a little bit, okay? And then the Antiquities Authority really, really wants us to save this thing. They love it, but they don't have any money. So they kept giving us all kinds of, recommendation, do this, talk to this, talk to this. So we've been writing emails to all kinds of archaeologists and experts in this, and we're trying to get up higher echelons in the government. Finally, a few days ago, we managed from 4 different ways. One person who knows the head of the Antiquities Authority, and another person sent him an email, and I sent him. So between 4 ways, we got to the head of the Antiquities Authority, who apparently is very well connected. And we begged him, listen, please, I know we don't have money, but please, we know you have a lot of connections, especially to this thing called the Heritage Department at the Prime Minister's office. So we sent him all these emails, different people sent him emails. And he finally texted me at 5 in the morning a few days ago. He says, all right, call me in the morning. So I called him and he says, I'll call them, don't worry. He called and he convinced them that it was a worthwhile project. And they said, yeah, we'd like to be involved. Anyway, all this just happened this week. And because this is Israel, the biggest problem was, who's going to be in charge? Nobody wanted to be in charge. We'll help, but nobody be in charge. And so for days they started going, no, you be. No, I don't want to be. I don't want to be in charge. I don't want to be in charge. I think finally today, right, Steve? They actually decided they're going to put the Antiquities Authority Conservation Department in charge, right?
That's what it looks like. There's a guy in the Antiquities Authority who I spoke with who's in charge of preservation of stuff. So things are starting to sort out. There's still a lot of uncertainty, which is why, somebody told me who's a fundraiser, he said, the government is very good at promising. They're not so good at carrying out their promises. So until you see the money, don't count on anything. So I guess it's the same all around the world. But so we're not counting our chickens yet, but we're much more optimistic today than we were last week at this time. Let me put it that way, for sure.
That's true. So we're still fundraising because we don't exactly know how much and in order to make it, to refurbish it and make it usable, that 75,000 is not part of that. So we want to make it usable. We want to build a little park. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful thing. And we would like to invite all of you, when you come to Israel next year, to come to Hanaton, not only visit us because we are an amazing kibbutz, but because of this wonderful find that you're part of, finding about. What other questions are there?
Do you still have a time limit that you've been given, a hard limit? It was supposed to be August 9th was last we heard.
I know. It was August 9th, and that's why at the beginning of this week, we were like frenzied. It was a frenzy. What are we going to do? But yesterday, apparently, Steve, you heard that someone told the construction company to put a hold,
That's what
right?
I'm told. That's what I'm told. I was worried all day yesterday that said, okay, everyone says it's going to happen, but has anyone told
Exactly.
the road company that they can't start the bulldozers on Sunday morning? And I was assured by somebody from the Antiquities Authority that they've been notified, and I actually called the guy myself this morning to verify that. In fact, he knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And at some point, I had to step back and let if the Prime Minister's office is involved, then they probably have more clout with the construction company than I do. So. So that's where things stand. So we are assuming, not assuming, the August 9th date apparently is no longer a factor, but there's still a lot of pressure to get it done quickly.
But on Sunday morning, I am going to go out there and just hang around just to make sure, because you never know. Yes, ma'am. Gerda, yes.
Gerda.
So if the Antiquities Authority is involved in it, and the Prime Minister and all these high authorities, will they permit you to make it a livable, usable mikveh? Wouldn't they want it to be preserved as it was found and as any archaeological site is shown to the public? Are there any problems with that?
That's a really good question. Okay, so when this crazy guy named Yeshu Dre, you have to Google him. Yeshu, Y-E-S-H-U, Dre, D-R-A-Y. Amazing guy. He does this all over the country. When he came and looked at it, he said, yeah, not only can I change, move it, but what if I can make it usable again? And of course, we freaked out, right? When the Antiquities Authority lady heard, we mentioned to her that she said, no, you can't do that. And we went back to Yeshu and he says, relax. First of all, it was going to be destroyed anyways. You're going to be saving it. And I promise you that I can fix it so that the plaster, he explains that the plaster holds water. And the plaster, when the plaster is in the exposed to air, that's when it starts to deteriorate. Plaster, he says, does not deteriorate when it's in water. So the longer the mikveh is in use with water, the stronger the plaster gets. That's according to this guy who is an expert in hydraulic limestone plaster, okay? He actually called the Antiquities Authority and he told us that he had an hour-long conversation with them, convincing them that he can do it, and they said, okay.
Ooh.
So we'll see.
Amazing. And one more question.
It's never been done, so we'll see.
One more question. I found the whole story absolutely fascinating, especially when you started saying that it started in June. I said June of what? Of 2019, 18, 17?
Now.
Then I realized it's all hot.
Yeah.
It is absolutely amazing. And I wanted to ask if there is any possibility to have this video for my temple. I belong to a conservative community, Adat Shalom in Los Angeles, and we drink sessions like that with much interest, and I'm sure people would find it so interesting. So would you be willing to allow us to listen to your story? And who knows, contributions might be coming.
With pleasure. With pleasure.
So Gerda, I just put, let's see, X Roads, Israel. I just put my email in the chat. We would love to do this. Steve, would you love to do this again?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
And Habiba, would you
I'm sure that Haviva, would you like to do that? Yeah, so we can absolutely early next week. Okay, because we're not.
Whenever you can arrange it, Gerda.
Yeah, that's right, because I keep thinking August 9th. It's not. August 9th will pass and the mikveh will still be there.
After August 9th, for
yeah,
sure.
Yeah. So anytime, let us know. You can even, I don't know how to get your.
I will write an email. I'm Donna Frankel's friend.
Okay.
And
email me and we can absolutely do this again. As you can see, we love talking about this. We're so excited.
And I love hearing him. I dug in my youth at Pasada, so I know.
Oh, really?
Wow.
I was in the army, so the army took us to. They didn't have enough manpower, so they took. So the Antiquities Authority asked the army for help, and the army was very quiet. It's before '67, so there was not much to do. So many of us went. So
how exciting! How lucky you are!
That's amazing. The story of mikveh and how mikveh became a prominent symbol of Jewish life was very, very much connected to Masada, because it was in Masada where Yigael Yadin for the very first time brought some big, big people in a helicopter, and he showed them 3 mikvahs, and he told them, this proves that we were on top of this mountain 2,000 years ago. And at that moment, people all over Israel realized a mikveh means Jewish life. And from there it became, so Masada is a very important story in the story of mikvahs. Yep.
Okay. I'll be in touch with you.
Okay, wonderful.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all very much for your participation and your attention. I want to thank Sarah and Barbara again for organizing things. You did a great job, and we were delighted to have the opportunity to share our excitement with you, and hopefully you've gotten a little bit of our excitement over the Zoom line. And I'll mention again in the chat is the juicer link if you want to take a more active part. We're very happy to have you join the effort.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm going to do some shameless promotion from an unemployed tour guide, because none of you are coming to Israel in the next few months. If you want to learn much more about Hanaton and the Lower Galilee, I do virtual tours. So you guys can contact me for that, and I can throw Stephen with me on that too. But yeah, so we can be in touch. The Zoom is amazing. I mean, we can talk and chat and do videos and everything. So any last minute questions? We are going to hang around until the very last person leaves.
I just want to say, no questions right now. I just want to say, Steve and Anat and Rabbi Haviva, thank you so much. This was really, really fascinating. And kol hakavod on all the progress that you've made.
I have a question. Go ahead.
Yes, question.
Yes, go on.
We were up in the Upper Galilee on our last trip to Israel. And there we were led by a young man who took us to a very ancient synagogue overlooking that was being restored privately until the Antiquities Department became excited by the fact that this magnificent structure was still up and around and was being restored, that they got involved with it. But the reason I bring this up because your statement that mikvahs were a sign of life, of Jewish life in various parts of the country. And it says to me, if this magnificent synagogue is being restored privately, but now with some help from Antiquities, and people are getting to see it, very few, why is it possible that near this synagogue there has to be a mikveh?
No, near this mikveh.
You're absolutely right.
There has to be a synagogue.
Every synagogue.
No, Mr. Siegel, you're absolutely right. There, they say if there's a mikveh there, it's quite likely that there might be a synagogue on the site as well. And in fact, towards the end of the dig, they found in an area that's not necessarily being destroyed, some indications of some seats, benches that were probably part of a synagogue in that area. They were found in what we call secondary use. In other words, after the synagogue was destroyed in 363, 363, the stones were used in another building. But it's quite they're thinking of going back in an area that's not going to be destroyed and doing some more excavations, because they believe there's enough circumstantial evidence and some evidence of some columns and some other things that would indicate that there is a synagogue somewhere on the site. And the question is, will they be lucky enough to dig in the right place in order to find it?
Well, just if I may, and I don't want to dominate, but we were at this synagogue. It's in such a magnificent setting up in the upper gallery, overlooking the Kinneret, and then the surrounding hills are so dramatic to the beauty of this individual. They've progressed dramatically to restoring this synagogue. If they're willing to invest that thing so that they built, the Antiquities build a road. When we went there was no road, but now they understand there's a road going up there.
And they're going to make a park.
And they're going to make a park.
I think you're talking about a place called El Kanatir, or
is that an Islamic word that you just used?
Yes.
Yes. That must be it. That's why I can't say it.
And the person who did that amazing work of restoration and if you were there, you saw the big crane that was above the thing, and how they scanned each one of the stones and then figured out which one went.
Right, they identified it.
That is the person who we're working with to get the mikveh out of the ground. The guy
That's exactly the guy who's going to do the mikveh for us.
Oh, okay. I'm great. I'm excited, but
that's him. He's that's him. He's going to be doing it. He's an expert. He's an expert in ancient archaeological technology. And that's exactly who we called, because the Antiquities Authority told us, call him. Now, he wasn't doing a private thing, because all of the sites in Israel, that's all belongs to the Antiquities Authority. They hired him. They got grants and money from somewhere, and he was doing work for them. It's a private company, but he was contracted by them.
Yeah, he is a private company, and he's the one who did the work, but it was under the auspices of the Antiquities Authority, with outside funding. Now the funding may have been from private foundation sources, though.
Yeah.
It was, but thank you for this. This has excited me. It's been a long time since I've been so excited. I caught my breath when we first came on that site and saw that thing being restored, that synagogue. It grabbed my breath away.
You know, they finished. He finished. You should go to the internet and look it up. It's called El Kanatir. They finished it. It's absolutely good. I can write it for you.
I'll put it on the thing.
Yeah. And not only that, they also built a visitor center. So now there's a road and a visitor center, and it's beautiful, beautiful. They finished it.
Oh my God.
To go back to Israel.
It was another reason to go back to Israel for us.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Our pleasure.
Go. All right.
You write that down, Al Kanatir or something.
Well, Marty knows.
Thanks very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Hey, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara.
Keep us up to date, please.
Okay.
For all exciting changes.
We are going to document it. We're going to get someone to film it. And we're excited. I mean, to say the least. Who's that next to you, Barbara?
It's
I can't hear you.
My son, Raiden.
Hi. Where's your other son that was in school with me?
You knew Joshua. He's
Joshua.
the Las Vegas area going to medical school.
Oh, wow. Please say hi to him. That's right.
Well, this is the younger sibling.
Any other questions? Concerns?
Very
So,
interesting.
I'm going to say Lehitraot and Toda. I know for you folks in Israel, it's very late, but this was marvelous. So thank you so much, and we look forward to about it.
Bye-bye, Sarah.
Bye. Good to see you all.
Gerda, I'm waiting for your email.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Laila Tov, everybody.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.